everybody. Welcome to another edition of Ace on Music. I'm joined by my co-host Sean.
Hello.
And wandering around here somewhere will be Boomer. I'm sure he'll make an appearance. So, this week I thought we would talk about hidden gems. What do I mean by that? Anybody who's a real big music fan can relate to the following. Throughout my life, I've always been chasing that rush that you get when you find something that you've never discovered musically before, and there's just a magical connection where you just want to you want to listen to that song over and over and over and over. And it's even more special when you find it in a band that nobody else seems to know about or is very unknown. So you've unearthed this hidden diamond that nobody else seems to know about. So I thought it would be fun if Sean and I talked about some of our personal hidden gems that we've discovered over the years and let you in on some of the cool stuff that we've stumbled on that maybe you'll really like too. So, what do you? This is something that you and I talk about sometimes when we hang out. I have a fire pit at the back of my house here, and sometimes we just pour a few bevies and listen to music and talk music. So, we've talked about doing a show like this for a while. So, I'll let you kick it off. What are your feelings on this subject?
Well, to me, I've always, since I was a kid listening to music, I know exactly what you're talking about with that rush, with me, I'm always chasing. It's an addictive feeling, that rush. And I go through extreme levels. Like I go through depression, I go through being happy, I go through being angry, and I jump subgenres, go through that, and it depends on my mood. Sometimes listening to a depressing song to me makes me feel undepressed after I'm done.
Well, it certainly feels like somebody's commiserating with you, right?
Exactly. So it actually makes me feel better. So bands. I'm not saying like Pink Floyd's depressing, but that's why I gravitate to some of that type of music. And then I could listen to very aggressive music, and that makes me feel better too.
So what would be an example of a hidden gem from your experiences?
Now, as far as like a song, band, to me, I got so many. It's really hard for me to say like hidden gems, but like certain bands, like right now, I like Nick Cave and Warren Ellis right now, and to me they're kind of hidden gems. I mean, they're popular, but not like super popular. It's probably a handful of people that haven't heard of them before, or Nick Cave, and then I like bands like aggressive, heavy bands like High on Fire is a band that I like a lot.
Oh, yeah.
It's just for some reason that just gets me going, makes me feel good, and gets a lot of anger out of my
Well, I'll
system.
tell you about one that I stumbled on, which I don't think a lot of people know about. A few years ago, the lead singer from Black Star Riders, Ricky Warwick, turned me on to this band from somewhere in the Midwest. They're called Biters. And they put out this record, their first real record, and I fell in love with it. I mean, there are so many I think it's called Electric Blood, really great songs on that album. I was so excited when they announced their second album was coming out. And it came out, and it was okay, but it wasn't a patch on that first one. And not long after that, the band called it quits. The lead singer went on he's doing a solo career now, but the first Biters album, I think it's called Electric Blood, absolutely amazing record. If you love classic rock, if you love, there's one song called 1975, which is just an amazing track. The title track's awesome. There's so much good music on that record. You gotta check it out. If you are into classic rock, check out Biters. That first record is amazing.
Yes, very good.
So another one that I'll tell you about was a few years back. Adam and I, we were working deeply with Motorhead, looking after their tours and such things over here. And we were in the middle of a North American tour when Phil Campbell, the lead guitar player, his father passed away. And in the middle of the tour, Phil was going to have to go home for the funeral. So we had to make some big decisions. And do we cancel the shows where he can't be there? or do we find a substitute? And we looked at several substitutes. We looked at a guy who was in a Motorhead tribute band to take his place, but in the end, we ended up with a fellow who I ended up becoming pretty good friends with at the time, and that was Todd Youth, who had been in Degeneration and played with Danzig and places like that. Amazingly cool guy. He has since passed on. But he had this band, I'm thinking it was around 2005 or something like that, that was called Chelsea Smiles. And they only did one record, but it was a great punk kind of inspired rock and roll record, really high energy. They never got the due that they were warranted with that release, and it was not at all successful as far as I know. But that is a record I still listen to on a regular basis. Chelsea Smiles, you gotta check it out. That's a good one. Do you got one that you can think of?
Kind of popped in my head just now. Probot.
Probot.
Remember Probot?
Oh yeah, I was involved with that to some degree.
That was an album I could listen to over and over when it first came out. It was just something about it. I guess it was just because it was an eclectic mix of different, styles. Well, almost the same style, but bringing in all the different elements of all those bands and the sound into that one album.
For those of you who don't know what Probot was all about, this was a project that Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters put together, where he wanted to make a record where each song was kind of a tribute to the music that he loved and grew up with, and he asked a lot of his favorite musicians to come play on different tracks. And I know that Lemmy went and played on Shake Your Blood was the track. It was actually the single from the record too.
Yeah.
I remember the day we shot the video for that, and Dave had brought in all of the Suicide Girls from the Suicide Girls website, and they were draped around the stage, and they played this song. It was such a kinetic song. Great record. Yeah, Probot was only that one record ever, but check it out. That is a great record. Great record to that's worthy of your attention.
Yeah, I think he also did that with Sound City, right? Like he got that movie that came out, or the documentary that came out with the soundboard for the recording studio, and then he got all those people involved that were famous records that were recorded on this console, and he had them do songs. That's
a good record too. Yes, Sound City, which is a studio in the Valley here that was very famous for having this incredible mixing board, a Nev board that seemed to get incredible recordings, and so many bands recorded some of the most seminal records in rock and roll in that venue. I mean, Dave Grohl headed it up because Nirvana recorded Nevermind in that one of the most important records from the 90s. Fleetwood Mac did a bunch of Rumors in there. There was Tom Petty did records in there, and Rick Springfield. There was all kinds of famous albums that came out of there, and Dave did a project where they did a documentary and a soundtrack to the documentary. That's also well worth checking out.
Yeah, it's a trip, because like when Stevie Nicks sings, it sounds like a new hit Fleetwood Mac song.
Yeah,
it's like he brings that out in all those all the artists,
Now another one that I stumbled upon. This was a long time ago. I'm talking in the 90s. I'm thinking so. When Rob Zombie was kind of I think he had actually left White Zombie at this point, had done his first solo record, or was going to do his first solo record. And at Halloween time, he came out with this CD called Hillbilly Hootenanny or something like that, where he'd taken tracks. It was a compilation album of tracks of a bunch of bands that he was excited about that really weren't known to the public. And there was one band on there that I fell in love with. I ended up buying their whole catalog, and I've seen them live many times, even toured with them, and they were called Deadbolt. They're from San Diego. Their style of music has been titled as Voodoo Billy, kind of in the same vein as the Cramps and things like that, but really cool stuff. I mean, if you check out their albums Tiki Man or Voodoo Trucker, awesome records, well worth your attention. If you like rockabilly style punk music, Deadbolt is one of the most underrated gems in that genre. You got to go see him. And I will give you all a tip that I never got, because the first time I saw Deadbolt play live, I was very confused, because it was in a club near Seattle, and the crowd was right up against the stage, and they were heckling the band like you wouldn't believe, trying everything that they could to piss the band off. They would call them names. They would try and stomp their feet. They would do it, and the band was giving it right back, calling the people all kinds of names. And I'm like, "What the heck is going on? I've never seen this shit at a show before." I found out that's what you do at a Deadbolt show. That's the tradition. That's what they just do. So
Yeah, you turned me on to that band. I love them, and
yeah.
I turned my wife on to them too, and she loves that band. It's a great band to listen to.
So another one I'm going to talk about is one that some of you might know, because she's a very well-respected artist. Her name is Laurie Anderson. Now, Laurie came out in the late 80s first, and she did have a very minor hit off her first record called Oh Superman. But she's a very eclectic artist. I mean, she is all about exploring different ideas. I mean, I've seen her live a number of times, and it's an experience like no other. I remember one show where she had an entire bodysuit on that, depending on where you patted yourself, a different sound would come. And so she would do this dance where she's tapping different parts of her body through the dance and making the music as she's dancing to it. And she does a lot of these spoken word performances, which also are to music that she's playing. And she tells these incredible stories. I mean, check out her album. There's a couple of seminal albums that are required listening if you want to check out Laurie Anderson. Home of the Brave, which was a concert film that she did in the late 80s. The soundtrack to that was just genius. And what attracted to me a lot was the ideas and some of the lyrics that she would put forward. Like, I remember one song called White Lily, which just has her walking on stage holding this flower, and she tells this story about a man walking into a florist and saying, like, what flower represents days gone by, and they keep going by endlessly into the future. And it was just like such a surreal comment. I mean, like, what would the florist say? And then the florist turns to him and says, a white lily, and that's the end of the song. And I just thought that was just such a clever play on words and everything. So, and then the other album of hers, which is absolutely genius, is called The Ugly One with the Jewels in Her Eyes. And this is more of a spoken word thing where she tells stories about her adventures and her travels in the world and the various things that she's done. Now, this is a woman who ended up marrying Lou Reed. She was Lou Reed's wife until his passing a few years ago. The last time I saw her perform, she was the artist in residence at UCLA here for a number of years. So I'm not really sure what she's doing these days or what she did during COVID, but Laurie Anderson, definitely worth checking out. You got another one?
I do. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole, though.
Okay.
In the world and mind of Mike Patton. There's a ton of bands from him that I could think of, but I'm going to start from the beginning with him, Mr. Bungle.
Okay.
That one was, for me, it was a hidden gem when I grew up, and I just absorbed that thing when I first got it. I couldn't.
So what's the story behind this band?
They're from Eureka, California. It's if you're not too familiar with Mike Patton, he plays in tons of bands.
The biggest one being
Faith No More.
Right.
Yeah, and then he's in like a Dead Cross and Peeping Tom and Tomahawk, and he's on many soundtracks, and he's even done voiceovers for video games and horror movies. So yeah, but yeah, they started as like a really heavy thrash kind of thrash band basically, but then they started doing like psychedelia, kind of making fun of it. Well, I wouldn't say making fun of it. They were just experimenting with their sound, and you have to hear their first debut album to understand what I'm talking about.
Now, this is a band that I was never really exposed to at the time, but I think you told me once that they made like a demo album or something, and it became extremely notorious and famous among musophiles, right?
Exactly. It was floating out there for a while, and I had the demo. I got a bootleg copy of it somewhere at the Peanut Records here in Alameda. But I think it was called Bowl of Chillery or something like that. But anyway, yeah, and then amazingly, they got back together again with the original guitarists, Mike Patton, Scott Ian, Dave Lombardo, and Trevor Dunn. They they recently got back together and they redid the demo, the way they wanted it to sound back then. But they, when they were thinking of who would sound good on this album, they said, "Oh, Dave Lombardo," because that's where they were mimicking those bands back then. Anthrax, Slayer, and you know, and unbelievable, man. Saw him, here in Los Angeles, and God, I thought Scott Ian's wrist was going to catch on fire or freeze up. But yeah, amazing band. You got to check them out.
Well, one band that would feel remiss not bringing up here, because many of our regular viewers know I love this band, but is a San Francisco-based band called The Residents. Now, The Residents are a band that I will fully admit at the beginning of this that you either love them or you hate them. I mean, they are genre-defying. They're their own thing. The Residents' music is not like anything else that's out there. And they have so many interesting concepts that they've explored throughout their 50-year history. I mean, they've got about, I don't know how many records. Like, if I turn the camera around, you can see I have one shelf here that is nothing but Residents materials that I've collected over the years. And, I mean, they had crazy ideas like, back in the 70s, they did an album that they called the Residents Commercial Album, because they said a pop song is really just a chorus, a verse that's repeated several times, and if you distilled a pop song down to its core, it would be 60 seconds long. So they did an entire album where every song was 60 seconds long, exactly. Think about that. There was 40 songs on this record, so they had to come up with 40 different musical ideas, and it was an amazing piece. And they ended up making some videos for it, which they called 1-minute movies, which are now part of the New York Museum of Modern Art's permanent collection. And then another time they decided they were going to embark on a 10-album series they called the Great American Composers, where on each album they would cover the music of 2 great American composers. They only ever got 2 albums into the series. The first one was called George and James, and it was George Gershwin on one side and James Brown on the other. And then the second one was called Stars and Hank Forever, and it was John Philip Sousa on one side and Hank Williams on the other. So, I mean, really interesting ideas are constantly being explored. The Residents, at the core of The Residents are some ideals that some other bands have employed, but are really kind of originating from The Residents. For example, their theory of obscurity, where they said that they made an album called For Elise, and they weren't going to release it to the public until they forgot that it even existed, because that was the only way they could really release it to the public with no fears or trepidations. And actually they held on to it for a number of years before they put it out. Or they would do things like whole mind plays, like they did an album called Eskimo, where it was basically instrumental music for the most part, but there was a story they wrote that came in the liner notes, and you were supposed to read the story while listening to the music, because it was kind of the soundtrack to the story. Or, all kinds of wonderful ideas. Now, another big thing the Residents do is they don't feel it's important that you know who they are, because it shouldn't matter. The music is what matters. Either you like the music or you don't like the music. So throughout their careers, the Residents have never revealed their identities. They always appear in costume. They never give interviews. Their managers do their interviews for them. And, they say their idea is that, it doesn't matter if one of them has the biggest toy train collection in the world or whatever. They just want to, communicate through their music. And the last really wonderful idea that came from the Residents to me was the idea that the human voice and the words that you say are an instrument in and of itself. And that when you are singing a song, it doesn't matter if the words that you say make any sense. Because they're just using them for their tonal quality and their musical quality as notes rather than portraying a story. So there are some Resident songs where you'll listen to the lyrics and you just go, what the heck are those guys bibbling on about? The only other band I've seen employ this really well is the band Yes. They do this a lot in their lyrics, where you listen to some of John Anderson's stuff and you go, what is that guy on about? That makes no sense what he just said, but it sounds beautiful. So.
Wondering if you're high or not. Is that me? Or
Yeah.
No, but if you get a chance to see the Residents live, gotta go see that band. Ace turned me on to them. Was it last year or this year?
It was last year.
Last year, yeah, we went, and I'd never seen them live. And honestly, I'll probably go to every Resident show that comes around now.
It's really an experience seeing them live.
They're a fun band to watch.
Do you have any other ones that you wanted to talk about?
Not off topic. I mean, not off top of my head, but I noticed you mentioned like songs that you can repeatedly listen to over and over.
Right.
You know, I'm kind of the bipolar opposite of that. Polar opposite, I would say.
Bipolar
opposite.
I like that.
But no, the reason why I can't listen to a song over and over again, because when I grew up, I was in the mid to late 80s. I was learning these songs on drums, and so I always, anytime a new band came out, whether it be Metallica or, a Queen song or something, I repeatedly listened to these songs over and over to get to learn how to play them. And then, like when Pantera came out, it was our religious band to go see them and listen to their albums over and over and over. And as I got older, I just can't do it anymore. So what I do now with these bands, I kind of put them on the shelf for very long periods of time so I don't ruin it. So like, I probably won't listen to a Pantera album for 5 years. Whatever comes on the radio I'll listen to, but then, I'll pull it out every so often and I'll listen to that whole thing. But I just don't like ruining the album per se. It's like, how many times could you hear the same Elton John song, or
I don't know. I think I could listen to Madman Across the Water every day.
Well, maybe that song, but you know what I'm talking about.
I know.
The ones that, and LA radio was horrible. Growing up, the after shows and late night were cool, but day radio was just pumped you full of the same songs over and over again.
Well, the last one I'm going to bring up for this episode, because I have a feeling that we're going to have hidden gem shows sporadically throughout the future here, but is a band that I recently got turned on to by my nephew. Now, he's a big metalhead himself. Slipknot's one of his favorites, and by the way, he has his own YouTube channel if you ever want to check it out, Chubby Chicken Productions, all one word. He does great little animations and stuff like that on there. But he is always exploring this new music that he finds on YouTube and things like that. And a few weeks ago, he turned me on to this band. Now, I'll preface this by saying that I am not really a fan of these weird little offshoot genre bands like Viking metal or, I don't know, Celtic folk music that's done with speed metal guitars and stuff like that. It usually is just annoying. But when he says you got to check this band called what were their names? Bloody Wood, as in Bollywood, but Bloody Wood, and they were an Indian folk metal band, and I went, Indian folk metal. This is gonna suck. But, he's my nephew and he's excited about music, so I'm going to support that. And he plays me this video called Start a Riot. I was blown away.
They're good.
They're really good. And they have this wonderful mix where they have, like, traditional Indian dancers dancing to the music. They have two vocalists, one who sings in English, one who sings in the Indian language. And the musicians are amazing. You got to check this out. I mean, I went into this wanting to hate it, and by the halfway through the song, I'm going, this is really good. I played it for Sean just a few days ago.
They're cool. So, it's like that band. Have you ever heard of 12-Foot Ninjas?
12-Foot Ninjas. I think that name's remotely. Yeah, okay.
Their music's great. Their videos are hilarious, and if you haven't heard them or check them out. They're really good. 12-Foot Ninjas.
Well,
trust me.
What we would like is for you to send us what your hidden gems are. We would love to hear about what hidden gems you've discovered over the years that you think we should be checking out. Send us your suggestions to acetalksmusic@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Or even any feedback on the show and things that you liked, you didn't like, whatever. We want to hear it from you. Also, if you're interested, we have our After Hours show, which appears on the Patreon platform. You'll see the address for it at the end of the credits on this episode. Come join us over there, and we tell lots of road stories there about crazy things that have happened on the road to us. So that's always fun. But in the meantime, if you want to leave us comments, you can also leave them on YouTube or whatever platform that you are experiencing this podcast in. We'd love to hear from you. And in the meantime, everybody, shows are coming back and everything, so just remember, the virus isn't gone yet. Just make every effort you can to keep yourself safe. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Cheers, everyone.